I'm delighted to have you here. This is so wonderful.
Thank you, Eithne, for the very generous introduction. I can see a lot of familiar faces, I think.
See, this is it, and this is good. So they're still valuing all of your great input, and this is very, very important for us all. Now, I want to talk to you first. We have so many things that we want to discuss, but I want to talk when we look at the global narrative, and particularly, yes, from climate ambition, but also we're at a time, I think, of great uncertainty in the world. And we're also at a time, I think, when we look at leadership and maybe people question that leadership. We look at resilience, we look at energy security, we look at industrial policy. So give us just your take, on sort of where we are globally with an energy twist to it, but I think it might broaden a little bit, and that you have my invitation to broaden it as much as you want. And what do we need to do in the world? What do you see as wanting?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, the focus of the IEW itself is about the transformation of the sector. And very rightly so, because I think this is one of the industries which actually silently enables growth of countries around the world. Maybe in one sense, a lot of abuse being faced by the organizations who are in the business because they think fossil is evil. So there's a lot of talk about transition and so on. I would say transition is definitely happening despite all the changes which have happened, especially in the last 1 year. I believe in the total investment of about 3 trillion, almost 60% of it has come in energy transition over the last 1 year. Having said that, I think the language of transition is changing over the last 1 year. And I would say,
in a good way?
Well, people talk a lot more about the industrial policy, the economic policy, and which have become the key drivers of the classical integrated energy policy. Today, there's a lot of talk about economic policies and industrial policies.
And it's hard to separate them, I think, really, when you think of it. Energy is at the core of everything we do.
I know. But the point is, many, including India, were focused on creating an integrated energy policy. But I'm only trying to say that the key drivers today are a lot different, even though the focus has, I would say the focus has shifted a little, because today most countries are bothered about local content, their growth, job creation, and trade, tariffs, taxes, and so on. So these are the key drivers, and especially things like local content is being talked of everywhere. So this has resulted in a shift, I would say, from the classical energy transition to what can we do more responsibly as an energy industry.
And again, this is something I think that everybody has to keep at the forefront. Let's bring this back to India. And, we look at India managing scale, managing transition. We have, tremendous growth in, demographics here, in energy poverty removal, we would hope, around the world and in the region too. So there's a lot of social and economic issues, that depend on the success of energy in this country. What are the leadership traits you think we need to be seeing more of to drive these?
See, India is in I would say in a more challenging situation because, as you rightly mentioned, we have the twin challenges of both scale and transition. When I say scale is a transition, scale is a challenge. What I mean is the economy is growing rapidly. We are already on a 4+ trillion economy, and we are rapidly moving towards a 10 trillion economy in the next 1.5 decades.
And that's exciting, but it's scary at the same time.
Absolutely, because see, one of the key drivers of that change is also going to be the availability of energy. Right, energy is a key driver. The form of energy can be debated. But energy is certainly going to play a major role. And we are also starting to talk about a 40 trillion economy. So in terms of absolute demand for energy, we are galloping. That is one. The second is transition. How do you really transition to a form of energy which is probably not affecting the growth or has an impact on other more serious issues such as climate? Even if you take the country like India, we have had lots of things which even the people on the street are blaming it on climate change. Right?
Yeah, that's true. It has become just the easy one. And many times it's not. It might be lack of leadership. It might be a lot of other things.
Correct.
But when we look at security, affordability, availability, all of that, these now have to be run in tandem. And no decision is necessarily a right or a wrong one, but it's got to be difficult for leaders to really keep all of that going, because I think back in the day you could do one or the other, but now how do you think people can manage to make sure that everything is moving simultaneously?
I agree with you. It's a good point. Actually, see, energy security is absolutely top of the agenda, not only for India, but for the whole globe today, especially for the import-dependent nations.
Yes.
For all the things that are happening around us. Affordability is certainly another key thing. In fact, if you had been there in the sessions yesterday, most people kept talking about this. So, security, affordability, reliability. Access in countries like India or in Africa, access is also a major issue. I mean, you had the African minister yesterday talking about lots of places where they don't even have an electricity connection. I mean, many people or many of us tend to take it for granted.
Totally take it for granted.
Yes. But the challenge here is, I mean, it is not one versus the other. Though it appears that there are competing interests in that, it's not really competing with one another. The ability of the leadership is taking all these things together, maybe at different pace.
Yes.
How do you really handle certain of the parts? All the parts are moving or moving forward, but how do you take certain parts slightly slower? How do you take certain parts faster? The fact of the matter is, in India, at least I truly believe that transition is more additive rather than substitutive. It may not be the same case everywhere. Probably in Europe, it's not the same case, because the additional energy needs are probably not there in many countries, which have actually sort of saturated. Yes. But in this country, because of the growing economy, transition is going to play in terms of the additive requirement rather than substitute.
And also, I think there's that urgency within the addition. It's not about planning, in the next 10 years, we need it now. And also, I think we've been caught short maybe a little bit with the growth of the data centers and all of that, where suddenly the energy sector suddenly went, wait a minute, this demand is going huge. But we can never be in a situation where we're choosing, or should we take care of heat and cooling and energy for the people? And that's the danger in some regions too, I think.
In fact, the Honorable Minister from Abu Dhabi yesterday was talking about air conditioners. The explosion of air conditioners which are going to happen.
And again, which we take it for granted.
Absolutely. So what is it going to happen do to the additional demand? In a country like India, we have an ownership of 44 vehicles per thousand. In US, it's 800 plus per thousand. Even if that 40 becomes, or 44 becomes 60, it means there's going to be a 50% increase. So the demand is definitely not going to be an issue in this country. I would say, from a leadership perspective, since we are discussing leadership, what needs to be recognized in terms of short term is, I think energy security and affordability are non-negotiable.
Yes.
Right. So that is one thing very, very clear. So there is definitely a need for people in leadership today to think of energy in terms of whether they can secure the energy requirements and whether it can be made affordable. I would say in the medium term, we can look at alternatives. I mean, how do you improve efficiencies? There is a lot of scope for improving efficiencies within the whole system.
Yes.
I'm saying whether it is by control of emissions through technologies or other things, there's a lot to do. So in the medium term, I think it'll do well for energy leaders to focus on improving efficiencies and look at alternatives, whether it's renewables or other things. I think the pathway to decarbonization is slightly on the longer term,
yes,
according to me.
So no, exactly.
So once the leader has a strategic clarity about these issues, I mean, I'm not saying that they need to believe the same thing which I am saying, but if there is strategic clarity, then issues such as even capital allocation on what we should be doing or what we should not be doing becomes much easier.
So when you think back, the leadership style particularly in India, maybe 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, within, your realm as well, that maybe does not work today and maybe will not work in 10 years' time. You talk a bit about pragmatic visionaries, and I love this concept. Tell us a little bit more about that too, and what do leaders need to lead the next decades, and maybe what do they need to lose?
You're right. I mean, leaders today need to be pragmatic visionaries. It's all nice to be idealistic. But if you need to sustain all the things that we have spoken of earlier, I think you need to be pragmatic in your approach from a leadership perspective. So when I talk of pragmatic thing, one is that they have to have their foot on the ground, right? And they should know really where it is moving forward. The ideal role for the present leadership would be to connect the future with the present. So they are going to be the bridge between the present and the future. So they leave a pathway for movement towards the future. So that's why we talked of, having strategic clarity and so on earlier. So a pragmatic leader, I would say, is one who acts as a bridge today for the future.
And when we look at the way the NOCs operate and the private companies, that can be very different too. Do we need to see maybe a bit more of a concept of risk-taking, entrepreneurship coming into the NOCs? Because they're run differently and they just have a different legacy of authority and a legacy of operations. What would you like to see change there? What do you think has to change?
For me, at least coming from a background of leading an NOC and being part of an NOC for a very, very long time, I think some of the things which leadership of NOCs face are a little different from what guides the private oil companies. The first thing I would say is we are much closer to public interest.
Yes.
Right.
Of course.
So you would understand that when we talk of affordability and all that, maybe a private company, for them, their emphasis is in terms of making money, keeping their stakeholders happy in one sense. The definition of a stakeholder in a public company or an NOC becomes much, much wider.
Yes.
Right? So that's number one. So how do you ensure that the public interest is always being taken care of? These are all experienced people in India. Every time we have a price revision of any product, there is always a furor. There are several other things which are going up. But when they see a petrol price being increased or an LPG price being increased, there is immediately a backlash.
So, I think in many countries, it's one thing that will get everybody moving, yes.
Yeah. So it also shows the impact and influence that we have on society as a whole. Okay.
And again, I think, we're all dependent on, transportation of some sorts. And for the most part, we're depending on cars. And even though there's a new feeling that everyone's going to leave their cars, I'm not too sure about that. I think we'll have them for a long time to come.
I'll say the second challenge of leading an NOC is that, at least in countries like ours, probably in most countries, there is always this aspect of second guessing.
Yes.
Which happens. When I talk of second guessing, see, you take a decision today, there will always be 100 opinions which are coming afterwards as to why this was done, why this was not done. I will take a small example of a cricket team. All of us are experts on cricket team. We lose a match this evening, people will immediately say this guy has to be dropped, that guy should have been taken, this bowler should have bowled, and so on and so forth. So all of us are experts. In one sense, actually, our industry is also like that, where people always tend to do the second guessing thing. The third thing is also the aspect of silence of leadership.
Yes.
I personally believe that sometimes silence can be haunting because as a leadership, it is important for people to convey transparently and honestly why they do certain things. It may not be right. You don't have a perfect solution for anything, even today. But once people start explaining, the leadership starts explaining as to why we have done certain things, then that really helps.
Yeah, because it's there's a lot of judgment been made, and particularly in the media and among the chattering classes, without a doubt, and no better people to do it than India. You've got a very vibrant press.
Yes.
It's very funny when I watch the Indian channels on television. Sometimes I might not understand what's going on, but they're the busiest, liveliest channels that are there. Everybody has some great opinions as to how things done, and often in hindsight. So it's a tough position to be in. But also let's look at that risk that leaders are, in a position that they have to take. Yes, there's operational risk. throughout the day-to-day business and throughout the life of the business, but also innovation risk. I mean, do we need a mindset shift, across the industry to make sure that we're dealing with the next decades, to make sure there's the supply of energy, and also, I always maintain it's the most important industry in the world. Nothing operates without the energy sector.
I just take it from the previous question, which you asked, saying that what was the industry like 20 years ago, or even at the time when you were leading? Okay, I think industries like ours were operating in a much more stable environment, maybe 20 years back, or even 10 years ago. When I was at the helm, right? Today the world has changed totally. Things happen much faster. There's so much of social media and chatter around everything that we do. So a leadership position is not at all an easy seat to be in today.
I'd say it's a very lonely one. Yes, sometimes. Yes.
But having said that, earlier people used to manage assets in stable businesses.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But today it is not about managing assets. Today it's managing contradictions, it's managing transitions, it's managing public opinion, and so on. So things have become much more challenging. So having said that, how do you look at risk? Because normally it is perceived that NOCs are risk averse and they wouldn't like to take risky decisions. I mean, since most of these people are from the Indian industry, they also can find deeper meanings in what I am trying to say. But the fact of the matter is that considerations, even the market doesn't look at NOCs very kindly. Sometimes if I may use the harsh term, my blood used to boil when I saw bread and biscuit companies being valued much higher than solid industries like ours. Okay.
Anyway, we can understand that. Yeah.
But having said that, I think there is a need for leadership change in that, even in NOCs. Because as you rightly said, there are two types of risks. One is an operational risk. And operational risk, there can be no dilution. You have to closely control operational risk.
Yeah.
You can't afford to have, ours is a hazardous industry. We can't afford to have safety incidences or any such things which are happening. The second thing is, our industries are all very, very huge. The assets are high value. You do projects, you do in billions of dollars. It has huge gestation period. So a sort of risk aversiveness is because of the nature of the industry.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, it is the operational risk which needs to be closely guarded. But if you think that innovation is not happening, it is only because, innovation risk needs to be looked at from a different glass by leadership. You need to give much more space for people to fail. As they normally say, most leaders say that, no, I've learned more through failures than through successes.
But culturally, in some cultures, maybe that's not as acceptable. And sometimes, there's plenty of ideas, but again, people look at the consequences and look at people, what are people going to talk about. And, forgive me, I'm, an outsider looking in on this, but I think there's also a much more hierarchical sort of structure of management in a country like India that might not be, it might be changing a lot more in Western society. Is that also something that we have to overcome, to bring more people, more ideas right across the company into the solution?
It's a wonderful observation. Let me say that actually there's no dearth of talent and there's no dearth of ideas in the industry.
But you need to keep them at home.
Even the private sector today operates a lot because of the people who have gone in from the public sector.
But a lot of your great Indian leaders are not sitting in India right now. So
anyway, having said that, the point is that's where the leadership needs to change. It's this thing. See, when there's a blur between operational risk and innovation risk, then the organizations become more conservative, right? But when the leadership is able to separate operational risk from innovation risk and gives much more freedom in terms of innovation, I think these talented people can definitely bring all the great ideas onto the table. I'll give you a small example. During my time, we had launched this special fund for startups.
Right.
So even in the board, we had proposed saying that if someone from within comes up with a startup idea,
good.
Give them a break. whatever financial aid you're wanting to give them, let them go outside, experiment for a couple of years. If it is successful, well and good. If it fails, let them come back and join the company. But then there were people who are pointing out policies saying that no, how can we allow this and not and all that. Even though, even at the very senior leadership position, we took a decision like that, it never got implemented. I'm saying that we need to grow beyond that. So there is no dearth of ideas or no dearth of talent. But the leadership's vision needs to change and it needs to percolate down the organization.
You know, we talk about the energy sector and its importance, you know, in economic growth and industrial growth and all of that. But we have to also look at social implications. And I want to maybe, you know, bring you back to something that you did as a company back in the day too, in terms of the Ujjwala story and the field here. You know, looking outside, yes, it's energy related, it's very importantly energy related, but the social impact that it can have. Talk to me a little bit about that and why that was so important to do.
There are a lot of experts. See, Ujjwala is also an energy transition.
Yes.
I mean, conceptually, because you're trying to wean away the people who are using firewood and gobar and all that as fuel to using a cleaner fuel, which is LPG. Okay, so in one sense, Ujjwala is an energy transition, but it became much more than a transition into a transformation because the impact that it had on the society as a whole. So yesterday the Prime Minister was speaking in his inaugural address that 330 million families in the country have actually benefited because of the Ujjwala scheme. 330 million, which is probably as good as the population of the United States, right? So that many families have got benefited because of the Ujjwala scheme. And it came out precisely because of a research study that a lot of women in India were dying because of indoor air pollution. But even when we implemented, we really never got to know of the true value of the social transformation. It's an interesting thing which I would like to share with those who actually do not know about it.
Yes.
The point of the matter is we initially thought that we are providing a clean fuel, okay, but it had a tremendous health impact on the woman.
Yes.
It had a tremendous health impact on the family. It had a tremendous impact on the environmental pollution. It had on safety of people. There was a governor who spoke saying that I'm from the tribal land and I used to go to the forest to collect firewood to cook. I can fully empathize with what this is going to do. The safety of the women, people who used to collect firewood from the forest were getting killed by animals and all that. So they were experiencing all those things. So Ujjwala brought in a grand transformation. And the economic impact is probably still not measured. Because even if you consider that 10% of the women who benefited from this, they had additional time to do some economic activity.
Yes.
It could be starting a small business or doing some sort of a cottage industry. The economic impact of this is enormous. So, I mean, it's a true social transformation. We had a coverage of almost 50 to 55% at that point of time. Today, we are close to 100% of conversion. And this is truly wonderful.
No, and you must be very proud of that and, you know, implementing that at the time and to see, you know, the consequences, the positive consequences of that, it's quite remarkable because it goes way beyond even the energy transition, as you said. It became a big social and economic, you know, growth story in many ways. We have to wrap this up, but before I let you go, I really want to maybe get a few little words of wisdom and words of advice for you to all of us here in terms of, you know, when we look to the future and when we look at, I think, the big transition that's happening in the energy sector, you know, and in our world, actually, it's not just the energy sector. Where do you think we all need to maybe look inside a little bit, maybe, and take time to pause to sort of pull that sense of leadership within ourselves and our communities and our jobs? What do you think is the one thing that maybe everybody needs to look to build leadership, you know, into our life? True leadership.
If you permit me, I'll make 2-3 points.
Do, please.
Okay, because it's an important subject. Number one is the young people in the industry. I mean, are they looking for, talent acquisition is definitely a challenge for the leadership in the industry because people say that this is not a very exciting industry to be in. But I would differ in the sense that it depends on how leadership positions our industry with the young. If they see things which are relevant, which are honest, I mean, by that I say that, yes, the fossil fuel industry is going to survive for the next 20 years, but there is a lot of energy transition which is happening. And so it's an exciting place to be in. That is number one. The second thing is today, I think people value national contributions. So if you are able to position the young, the national contribution element of the industry, I think it will definitely excite. The third thing is in terms of the mobility, the voice that the young people look for in such organizations, which are typically treated as hierarchical organizations. No? People start asking the whys more than what they should be doing. Why am I to do this? And it is better for leaders to recognize that. The second aspect is, I mean, how do leaders get groomed? You know, in the sense that I personally believe that this industry is better serviced by people who remain in the industry for a long time, because they get a lot of wide areas to work in over their lifetime. Having said that, it needs a deeper understanding, but at the same time, people should be groomed. If somebody makes an assumption that just because someone has grown up the ladder, he naturally becomes a leader, I think it's wrong. So I think organizations have to do a lot of things in terms of how they groom leadership for the future, catching them young. There are people who have silo mentalities who want to be experts. There is a space for experts. There is also a space for those who have the potential to rise. So there is functional leadership is one thing, enterprise leadership is another thing. Okay, enterprise leadership, if you look at only a small population of your young, you need to build and groom them in a much different way.
And I think on that very encouraging note, I want to thank you so much. And also, I know that you're going to be of great value to so many boards that can actually hopefully instill, a sense of new purpose to so many of them, to really be rethinking what they're doing, because I think it's so obvious. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for imparting all your great knowledge and your great encouragement and optimism as well. Thank you.